I may have made a bit of an interesting life decision recently. So let's talk about that. If we haven't met before, I'm Liz. I'm just a regular person going on random adventures and just sort of sharing my insights along the way. As you'll see from the title of this video, I recently made the decision to purchase a tiny caravan, and I am essentially upending my life over the next few months where I will be leaving my hometown, leaving my home I've been renting for the last almost 3 years, leaving everybody I know and going on a bit of a road trip, living nomadically for a little while. I wanted to share this for people who are like minded, who might be interested in this lifestyle, already are living this lifestyle, or for those of you who maybe it's been on your bucket list for a little while but just have no idea where to go, or even why someone might want to live this way. Particularly as someone who has never lived nomadically in their life, I've done a little bit of travel, but not very much. I've only been overseas like a handful of times, and two out of those times were to go and see family. So I haven't, only in recent years, I've really started adventuring, and I'm someone in their mid-30s. And I just thought it might be interesting as someone who is single, solo traveling, who's never lived nomadically, and has just decided to upend their life essentially and just live an entirely different way. So I made this decision to live this way almost exactly a year ago. So I'm recording this in July of 2024. I made the decision in early September of 2023. In July of 2023, I'd just gotten back from an epic, almost 3 week road trip adventure from my hometown in Queensland all the way to the Northern Territory. And I'd had an amazing time. The setup I had, if you haven't seen my previous videos, I literally just camped out the back of my car. I sort of turned it into a micro camper, so to speak. But essentially, I just put a mattress in the back of my car, folded the seats down, put the mattress in, and slept in the back of it. And essentially, that was my setup. I did that for a number of reasons. First of all, out of cost necessity, I couldn't really afford to buy anything else. And I knew that my car was long enough. I have a Subaru Forester. It was long enough that I could pop a mattress in the back. I just got one of those mattresses from Clark Rubber, just a mattress foam, like Caravan mattress foam that you can cut to size. Chuck that in the back. And that was really affordable. It meant my setup cost me like $200 because I got a little gas cooktop from my grandmother and just a handful of like just bits of cutlery and honestly and essentially. And the second reason I went with the low tech sort of setup, I mean, essentially the budget was the main thing, but the reason I would recommend a low tech setup as well is because I honestly I just didn't know if this lifestyle was going to be something I would enjoy, or rather than saying a lifestyle, but these kinds of adventures, these kinds of trips. Because at that point, I just thought, oh, I've got my few weeks of annual leave a year, and if I really like this, I might consider using my annual leave every year to go on epic road trips like this. When I got to the end of that road trip, it was absolutely epic, and I learned so much about myself. I've created other videos about the benefits of solo road trips. And when I got home, I felt very satisfied with what I'd experienced. I thought, yes, excellent. I've unlocked this way of travel. I've unlocked this way of adventuring that I really enjoy. These are the holidays I'm going to continue investing in future. And I felt very at peace with my life at that point. I thought, yep, I'll just work the, what would it be, 47 weeks of the year to then have my 5 weeks of the year annual leave. And I'm very fortunate to even access annual leave, right? Like so many of us don't even have access to that. So I felt very fortunate to have that. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the way you want to look at it was just a few weeks later where I almost had this a crisis of sorts where I felt something just didn't feel right. And at first I thought it was just the good old post holiday blues. I would get over it soon. But after a little while, I had a feeling that it was more than post holiday blues. I wasn't necessarily living very comfortably when I was doing these road trips, like just literally sleeping in the back of my car. And, I did borrow my dad's fridge as well. So I had a fridge on the front seat, and that was incredibly helpful as well. But yeah, it wasn't a very comfortable way of doing things. But there was something about the person that I was when I was on the road and being out in nature more and being in my own space a bit more. It felt the most me I've ever felt, me, quote unquote, I've ever felt. And suddenly I realized that the life that I was living wasn't the life that felt aligned to who I am anymore. And I have to say, that wasn't the enlightening, exciting moment that I'd hoped that it would be. It was actually very scary and distressing. I also felt like I wasn't being grateful about my own life. I felt ungrateful and that I was shaming myself. And you should just be really grateful for what you have. You have so much more than what other people get the privilege to have. So there was a bit of that going on. So it was sort of like this awareness phase, and then there was like almost this like denial phase where I tried to deny that I was feeling that way. And then come September, so that was all happening through July when I got back from my road trip, and then come like mid-September, there was almost this realization that it just what this means, don't fight that feeling. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, it doesn't mean I'm an ungrateful person, but what it means is that something about my life needs to change because I'm not happy with the way things are. Like, I'm not happy, and that's just the truth. And at that point I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't really know how I was going to get there, but what I did know, and the decision that I did make in that moment, was I need to find a way to live nomadically. That is something that I need to do. It's something that I feel really called to do. It feels very me to do this, and I need to find a way to do that. Even if it's a short period of time, I need to have this experience. That experience I had for just 3 weeks, I need to know what that's like for a longer period of time. I need to know who I am when I'm doing that for a longer period. So that's the decision I made. I said, I need to live nomadically, and how am I going to do that? Fast forward a few weeks after that, I mean weeks, people who know me personally will know when I get an idea in my head, I just smash that idea. Like, I will research the crap out of it. I'm a very I'm a considered person, and I will take some time making decisions about things. But once I've made a decision, it is like concrete, harder than concrete, like diamond in my mind. There's nothing shaking me from that decision anymore. Once I've realized that that feels very aligned to who I am and what I want to do, I will just invest in that decision, and I will do everything to start researching everything I need to know about this decision and find a resolution to it. Like, find a way forward. I'm still flexible in my thinking. I can change my mind. That's absolutely okay. And something I've invested a lot of time and energy into. I'm allowed to just pull out of that idea and investigate another option. So I'm not rigid in that way, but I put a lot of energy into finding clarity for myself. If there is a question, I will answer it for myself as much as I can. So, just in those few weeks, I'd come to the conclusion that the best way for me to live nomadically was to buy a caravan, a mini caravan. There's loads of different reasons why you might want to opt for a caravan over something like a camper van or continuing to live in your vehicle. There's pros and cons of each option, and I'm happy to create a video about that if anyone's interested. I think there's quite a few videos on YouTube, really helpful YouTube videos and websites that talk about the pros and cons of camper van versus caravan. But I knew with all the factors that I needed to consider that the caravan was the way to go. And at that moment, and I documented the day, I believe it was the 12th of September, 12th of September 2023, that was the day that I decided I am buying a caravan and I need to find a way to make that happen. There were a few other reasons why buying this caravan and living nomadically seemed like the answer for me. So there was just the fact that it felt aligned, right? Then there was also this sense of needing to find a place that felt like my home. This is hard to say, and it's not anything against anyone who lives in my hometown. I have people here that I dearly love and give me so much in terms of my sense of connection and belonging. But there's something about this place that just doesn't feel like my home anymore. I just feel a bit out of place here, and I can't really quite put my finger on why. It's not that I'm not loved here. I am, and it's not like there's not cool places here. There is. I'm part of a running group and I really enjoy that. It's not like I haven't invested in my community. I do love the work that I do. I work for a university. I'm an academic, and I absolutely love my work. I love teaching my university students. Like, it's been one of the most meaningful things I've ever done with my life. And so it's not like there's not good stuff here. It's a really pretty area too. Like, I'm a trail runner, and there's so many amazing places to be able to hike and trail run in. There's beautiful beaches. Like, there's so much here to enjoy, and yet there's just something inside me that says I need to find a new place of community. So there's sort of this pull. I mean, I've been living in the same place for 18 years as well, and maybe it's just a bit of itchy feet. Like, I just need to experience something else. I need to be somewhere else. Another reason why this idea really appeals to me, and whether this is about getting on the road or not, this is more just about buying a caravan and just living in a caravan wherever you happen to be living in a caravan or a camper van, is, let's be honest, paying rent sucks. Paying rent absolutely sucks, and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm so tired of it, and I know so many people feel this way. Rent is getting so expensive. Like, this is the case in Australia. I'm sure this is the case in many countries around the world right now. Rent is so expensive that if you had the money for a deposit, paying a mortgage is almost the same price, if not cheaper. Like, it's actually getting crazy. The last nail in the coffin, so to speak, was also around this time last year, where it was, I think it was like June of last year. I think it was before I went on the road trip, and I just been contacted by my real estate agent, who was a lovely woman at the time. There was another real estate agent that came later that was not as kind as this woman that I was working with, but she sent me a offer to renew the lease. It had been increased by $50 a week. So it had increased again, but this time $50 a week. So over the duration of me living in this little house that I'm still living in at the moment, I've had my rent increased by $70 a week at that point while I was living there. And I'm someone who is privileged. I have a full time, quite decently paying job. And even for me, like, I'm paying $400 a week right now. And it's just, I'm never going to be able to save at this rate. Like, I still have debts that I'm paying off. Like, I have a car loan that I'm paying off, a secondhand car too. It wasn't an expensive car. I had some debt from when I had a medical procedure a few years ago that I had to put on my credit card. It wasn't a great That's not a great financial thing to do by any means, but it was a pretty important medical procedure that Medicare did not fully fund. So I felt that I needed to do that. And I also had some debt from some legal fees that I had to pay a few years ago when I went through a divorce. So all of these debts are not from like fancy holidays and living a lavish lifestyle. These are debts that are pretty common to a lot of people, and particularly being a single person with one income. I can't imagine what it's like when you have children. I can't imagine what it's like when you don't have a full time permanent salary. It is getting so challenging to be able to afford rent and have any sort of financial security. So, buying this caravan was also a way out of continuing to pay rent. I didn't want to pay rent anymore. I didn't want to continue paying off somebody else's mortgage anymore. I couldn't deal with the rent continuing to go up. So that was a big push for me to consider living alternatively. Of course, there are other considerations. I could go back to living with housemates again. I've lived with housemates before. I've been lucky that I've actually had some really good housemates over the years. But as someone in their mid-30s, and I say this and I know that I have privilege in being able to say this as well. Like, some of us just literally don't have a choice. And in fact, in my earlier years, I did not have a choice. I was that, $1 ramen gal. That's still those days are still pretty present in my mind. And there's people that live even harsher lives than that, of course. But if I can help it, someone in their mid-30s, I just would prefer to not have housemates if I can get around it. So it was that. The other thing is, as well, thinking about my dogs. I have two little dogs, if you haven't met them before on this channel, and their welfare is also really important as well. There is a bit of a risk that comes with housemates. Like, are they going to treat them the same as I'm going to treat them when I'm not home? I can't control who comes into the house. If they've got guests that come into the house, I can't control that. I can't dictate that. You can set boundaries, but it's just not quite the same security that you have when you're the only person that is your caretaker of your animals. So that was a consideration too. So then all these leads were sort of going into that one direction of, I think the van is what I want to do. Of course, the other thing is I needed to get a loan to be able to afford the van. But the way I justified it, or the way that I made it make sense for myself, not really justifying it, but is the money that I spend paying off my van plus van site fees plus insurance for the van. I did the math, it's still cheaper than the rent that I'm paying right now. So if it was more expensive than paying rent, that would start to financially not make a lot of sense. But adding it all together, it's still cheaper than what I'm paying in rent. And at least this way, most of that expense that I'm paying per week is actually paying off an asset. I'm paying off something that I will eventually own that I can then resell, not for exactly what I bought it for, but quite decently. I mean, this van that I bought, they're selling for only a few grand cheaper secondhand as they are brand new. And eventually, this is an asset that I could then resell to get money back. Not all of my money back, but at least some of it. Whereas when you're renting, you get none of it back ever. It wasn't really about the reselling of it because I'm hoping to be able to live this way for quite some time. But it was just the fact that eventually, when I pay it off, I'll then, my overheads, my living expenses will be even more significantly reduced, and I'll be finally out of that rental trap. So that's sort of part of it. And I'm not saying that buying a caravan, getting into more debt, getting a loan for a caravan is the solution, but it felt like a pretty good solution for me. So a few days ago, I took the leap and got a loan approved for $38,000, and I bought my tiny caravan. It was so stressful. Like, there was just the learning curve for this has been so massive, so massive. Like, I've just been driving around in my car. I have a Subaru Forester. Her name's Clementine. She's a legend. It's an automatic car. I was stuck to sealed roads. I mean, I don't have any van life experience whatsoever. Just and in terms of like a caravan, like one of the downsides of a caravan, there's so many benefits to getting a caravan, obviously. That's why I went with it. But like, one of the downsides is there is so much more to learn about your safe weight limits, learning how to tow and reverse a caravan, you know, making sure you don't overload it, all these extra things that you have to think about with a caravan that you don't have to think about with a camper van. And it's been one of the most like stressful weeks of my life leading up to it isn't. I've had harder weeks. I certainly have. It's one of my most stressful weeks I've had in quite some time leading up to it because there has been so much to think about. But I can already tell you it's been so worth it. There's a lot going on, and I thought I'm not gonna keep delaying in sharing this adventure with you. This is like literally my initial thoughts, but what I will tell you is, yes, I am in the van right now. So it all worked out. It was very stressful. I have the van in my carport right now. I reversed that sucker in myself. I'm very proud of myself. Anyway, I'm in the van. Very quick tour. It's not aesthetic at the moment. I will give a proper tour once I've like got it all properly set up and I've largely moved into it. But yeah, the dogs as well, if you're interested. There's one. There's the other one. They seem pretty comfortable, right? Like they seem to be adapting to this new life. Like we've been spending like I've only had it a few nights, and like every night we've been in here because we're so excited. And they've I love them. They just adapt so well. These little guys like have been on a number of road trips with me, so I guess they're kind of used to mum making random decisions and being in random places. But yeah, all that to say, I wanted to timestamp this moment in my life and share this with you. And if you are interested, please subscribe to the channel and come along with me on this wild adventure. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows where I'm going to end up? But I've made a decision and I'd love for you to join me. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you soon.